we'll kick off now. Welcome to the podcast again, episode 2. And the last episode we talked about really just the series of you going through. So you were going through the stories of your parents. You were going through the story of how they were split up, how your father was taken away to Russia, and how you just barely made onto this train, landed in Holland, managed to escape being sent to Russia, where everyone on that train and going to Russia died. Got back to Germany. You were in the stadium. You had these military blankets, essentially creating these little 4x4 almost little rooms that everyone was living into. And you found a little light, and Tante Frida, your sister Frida, touched it and thought she got hit by a bomb. So after that, you jumped on a boat. You ended in Brazil, but they would not let the boat dock. You talked about stories of trading your watch for oranges. Not your watch, but people were trading jewelry for fruits and...
Interestingly enough, they threw it way out into the ocean. As it floated down, we could see the flicker of it. And these dark little bodies of the locals would dive and chase it down. Yeah, it was a fantastic sight. Look at it, and they look up, and they say, 3 oranges, 4 oranges, 1 banana, and then they... And we'd fight for it.
Must have been nice.
Cheerful scene.
Yeah.
Beautiful scene.
But you don't know exactly, you don't remember what happened between you being in Brazil and necessarily landing in Paraguay.
Only that it was there was no prearranged transport. The boat people demanded that we stay on the boat and be taken to Rio de Janeiro. Mm-hmm. The boat couldn't function, but they wanted us to stay until they'd repaired it. We had the problems on the high sea, the breakdowns. So Our Lady, Dick, she says, absolutely not. Everybody, we're all getting off. Considerable standoff. It took weeks to arrange with Germany, with Canada, Paraguay, transport across the country, rivers, to get to the destination. That I remember nothing of. It was by oxen, wagons, horses, trains, riverboat. So I hear.
Right.
So the next thing, we are in a village in a semi-desert, what we called Struck forest. And they had been there, the people had settled down here from Canada. They were Saskatchewan people who, when Saskatchewan decided that education would become a provincial responsibility, they would build the schools, they would provide the teachers. The Mennonites, with their dogged determination that nobody was going to influence their children, packed their bags, and they said, just where are we going to go? And some of them traveled for 6 months to get to Paraguay. One group arrived in Paraguay. The land that they were promised hadn't been surveyed. Out of the group, half of them died waiting for the surveying, running out of food, shelter, no medical supply.
How far from a major city were you guys? From any major city?
I shouldn't guess, maybe 300-400 kilometers from Asuncion. But there was no highway, so it didn't matter. It was another planet.
Yeah.
So we arrived at this group, which were, as we called, Old Colonie, the old-fashioned Mennonites. Very stubborn in terms of controlling their families. Also very stubborn very generous in repopulating. The average family was probably 12 or more. I stayed with one family. They had either 21 or 23 children in the family. Mm-hmm. That's an army. But genuine, rough, nothing polished, just good-hearted, faith to persevere, just a human, somewhat religious faith and perseverance was unbelievable, the tenacity and the obstacles that they had and what they all sacrificed. They could have stayed in Saskatchewan, they could have stayed in New York. They traveled through New York, and they left all of that to go to some snake-infested, cockroach-infested
That must have been so hard to adjust. I feel like Germany and Paraguay are just completely opposite places, but how do you adjust?
Well, that's where their faith and their perseverance comes in. They don't ask questions. They says, we're going to do it. They don't ask for the price they have to pay. Mm-hmm. My mom was primarily determined that I was never going to do military service and that we were going to remain as far as absolutely possible in this world from any conflict such as a Soviet and a Nazi conflict. In other words, the Second World War. The communist regime, the Nazi regime on their own were as violent and vicious as the war itself. I mean, as many people were exterminated on the basis of ideology than were killed in the war and in combat. A lot more.
Yeah.
So there wasn't anywhere to point and say, there's lies the fault. Everybody was guilty.
Yeah.
So getting away is just to find quiet space where they could live their own lives. So we got dropped off, and this is probably my first recollection, in a small village made up of Mennonites from Saskatchewan. I learned my first 2 words, English words. Bicycle. I didn't know what a bicycle was.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then no, I guess was the other word, because it was probably until I came to Canada 10 years later where I've learned my 3rd word.
But so you had arrived in Paraguay, they had to survey this land, and essentially, I remember seeing a photo of you as a kid, and it was almost like a picture you'd see in Africa of a native tribe isolated, because the houses were quite literally just made out of mud, and it was absolutely like primitive. I couldn't, when I imagined it in my mind, I saw it, far more like advanced in terms of wood and structure, and I was absolutely blown away to see how simple and how almost third world it looked.
It was beyond the 3rd world, but something to remember was that we started with absolutely nothing. What we carried with us, all we had. We didn't have hammers or saws. We shared hammers, we shared saws, we shared tools. We didn't have boards. We didn't have planks or 2x4s. No such thing existed when we showed up. The colony was designated in roughly 45, and 2 large ships had arrived earlier. We were the ones that had sort of been pushed aside. Or rather, all of us were just scraped off the street, so to speak, across Western Europe. MCC, Mennonite Central Committee, had sent a delegation, very small group, but very dynamic, from Holland into Germany. Their MO was feed everybody, but those that came from Russia of Mennonite origin, ask them where they want to be, and facilitate that they get there. So these 2 simple instructions were offered to them. The Mennonite groups in East Coast U.S. and in Canada, they prepared a lot of products. One product was meat, of course, and the only way you can ship meat from here to there is to can it. There was no canning process, though. Jars were available. So beef, chicken, meat, in other words, were packed in glass jars like some do with fruits and vegetables today. Do they still do that? I don't know. In glass jars. But then those glass jars were transported by horse and buggy, then by train, then by hand onto the boats for weeks across the ocean, and then again by hand and horses, etc. So glass was a terribly dangerous product, dangerous for the product itself to survive and remain wholesome. While the Mennonites in the prairies were sending products, one of the old men, a farmer, figured out how to create a tin can. A farmer in 1945-46 figured out how to make a tin can and seal it tight.
How did he do that?
I have no idea.
Oh.
But you might want to search out, because it's an interesting question. Yeah. He set up his canning, his sealing, etc., and it just improved the supply of Western Europe, because there's hardly any historic records on how much starvation happened across Germany, Russia in general. Yeah. People died of starvation. There's a story about people scraping chalk off the walls, taking letter stamps, soaking the glue off it and eating the glue. So starvation was beyond our imagination for about 2 years. We were in that Colosseum.
Yeah.
So we got some. I have no idea what we ate. I remember no meals, no food, but some of what we got was brought there by Canadians and Americans.
What did? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, tin cans, fascinating. That farmer, produced more and more cans, shipped more and more, got product from across the country. He tin canned it, shipped it over there. When it was over, he sort of sat back. Okay, mission accomplished. So who wants to have the technology of tin cans? He says it's free to anybody who's prepared to support worthwhile causes internationally. He gave it away free. Now, when you look at the tin cans on the shelves by the billions these days, he could have been the richest man in the world, probably. He says, well, mission accomplished. We fed the needy for the first few years.
So it wasn't just that he figured out how to do a tin can. He created what we know today as like the tin can.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's much more than I imagined.
Yeah, in 45, 46, as a plain farmer in the prairies. And they didn't, I mean, by that time they probably had tractors, but with generally without useful tools, without too many attachments, like things that would chew up the earth, would plant potatoes and so on. Like the accessories to the tractors were hardly existent.
Yeah.
The tractors were there for pulling. So it was still, farming was still a manual job.
Totally.
So the simplicity of the Mennonites and their reluctance to become wealthy or important in Canada and America was astonishing. Maybe to curse their race a little bit, when they arrived in Russia, they had sent a delegation in Danzig. They collected some money. A delegation of Mennonites was sent to Russia, to the Ukraine, to explore the land. They saw good, rich, fertile black soil. They said, "This is our God's blessing." They went back home. They gave the report, and then they went back. And that delegation, them and their families, got the best farmland, and they never overcame that kiss of that bite of the snake, the fight, the hardship, not hardship, the hard feelings, the antagonisms, the hurt feelings, if you like, remained forever. It was a bit of a bite of the snake because the Mennonites in Russia never overcame that they were, by that time, becoming greedy, competitive, trying to rise above their neighbors, and lost their faith. In Canada and America, the religious groups, and there were dozens of them, even the Huguenots were the French, and then a series of American types that were persecuted and came to America. They were still continuing forever, perhaps still today, I don't know, to be driven by spiritual values. The ones that stayed in Danzig turned militant, Danzig. They turned towards the Nazis and were quite sympathetic with the Nazis. Many of them joined the Nazis movement. Those that went to Russia became substantially greedy.
I want to shift this back to Paraguay and in your life there. So you're in Paraguay, and Oma, you're living with your mom, my Oma, I'm referring to her as Oma, and your sister. And what is the day-to-day life? I mean, you're 7 years old, and you lived in Paraguay until you were about 16, 17? Before you...
6 to 16, yeah.
16,
yep.
17, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, 6 to 16. And before you had your journey to get up to Canada. So what was it? Because there's so many stories I've heard, and I think probably more of the mischievous ones were probably in and around when you were 10 years old and up, you know, sneaking into the military vehicle and in the convoy and disappearing. But when you were younger, I'm curious about, we can go back to that story, but what did Oma do for work, and what do you remember the day in life being growing up as a kid?
We were. I kind of stopped at the point where we were the last arrivals in the colony, in our colony. There were 23 villages that had already been established. That was the groups that came by Volendam, the boat Volendam 1 and 2. Somewhere before that time, MCC members probably developed wells in the center of a prairie patch, let's say a grass patch, wild bitter grass. If they found water, they would create a well where you would pull the buckets up. We had no plastic; they were metal buckets. We'd pull them up by hand for our consumption, for essential irrigation, and for the watering the cattle. So we were a slight bit late. We were the ones that had been particularly beaten up in the war. The earlier ones had come earlier. They were sort of solidified families and generational families. To our colony, we were not a cohesive group. We were tossed together, a bunch of people who didn't know each other. Our village had been established just before we got there, and small parcels of land had been handed out. We had maybe 50 feet across, a road through the middle of the village, maybe 50, 60 feet wide for a single family, or for a single small family, and almost double that for a larger. Barbed wire had been strung, fences had been built on both sides of the road. So the road was open for anybody to travel through. To get into the yard, you had the barbed wire and the barbed wire gate, without wood though, just sticks, no 2x4s. We came across a family that had settled down, says, we're not staying. They picked up their bags and left. They said, there you go. If you can pay us anything at all, pay us. If not, well, move in and pay us later, and they took off. So we had a little two-room house, sticks like this, maybe that. You want to know how it's built?
Sure, yeah.
Sticks were driven into the soil, into sand, little square thing. Ropes tied the tops together. Sticks were laid across, I believe, 3 from post to post, and there'd be maybe 4 or 5 posts. Sticks would be tied to it, one across the top, and then a roof truss, sticks again, all tied together. To create the wall, we imported from Spaniards or from distance straw that was perhaps that long. So you take 1/3 of that straw, you create a hole in the ground if you had some logs. A type of a clay that was sometimes available, sometimes not. So we tried to find the best kind of combination of clay. Dumped some water on that. Kids would trample the hell out of it until it became nice and mushy. Then 1/3 of the length of a straw would be tempered in there, slapped around up and down until the clay had soaked all the way through it. That would then be brought here. The one that was full of clay, that end would be wrapped over a stick, spread out and wrapped around the grass, end that reached the ground. Small pieces at the time until the surround was done, and then you went to the higher on. There you do the same thing, wrap it out, but that straw would be overlapping on the bottom side, like shingle shades. Yeah. Up to the top, and the roof, the same thing. You just lay it on top. So you were all around was straw, held together by mud, or on one end, straw only in between, and the same with the roof, sticks and straw, and the weight of the straw, the weight of the mud, held it together largely. We had the occasional hurricane, in which case, well, it just disappeared and we'd start over again, or the roof would be carried away. So we inherited, to some degree, we took over when it was already there. We had small bags of European Russian seeds that many had brought along. We had no idea what to grow. We were that out of tune with the locals. So we experimented with grains and none of them grew. We repeatedly seeded, it all got blown away. We settled eventually, peanuts worked, and then there was a black kind of a grain, it's called kafir, that was imported by the Spaniards. We acquired some of that seed from the locals, but the locals were far away from us, so someone would make a deal somewhere and we'd all be handed out a little patch, a little handful of kafir seed. It was deemed not to be consumable by human beings. It was for animals, horses. I noticed in Spain they still grow it, and it's only for horses there, and for coffee. They roast it and grind it and make coffee out of it, called prips. So we began with peanuts, and then with kafir, and then with cotton. So we knew nothing about any of those crops, but those were the only crops that during our time down there produced a crop. So we'd create, a garden, our fields in lines. We'd plant the seed by hand, and sandstorms were constant. Heat was brutal. The sandstorm would come across, and they would take out maybe half, maybe a third, sometimes more than that, of the seed, just blow sand and seed to kingdom come. We'd go back and plant again, seed again. Then eventually 1/3 and 1/2 of them would grow, and they would then hold the soil together. We'd taper them together, the seed, the soil, temper it until we had a row of full-grown cotton kafir peanuts. So we would sometimes have to seed it 3 or 4 or 5 times over before the crop, before a field was fully seeded. The population in our village, because we were helter-skelter, scraped together across Europe, so to speak, we lived fairly central in the village. Next to us was, they were hoping to get a preacher or a teacher, so they built a very small little hut for them. And then the community in those societies, maybe today largely as well, a church serves as a community center, as everything, even cooperative stores, once you developed into operating your own co-op. Even that came out of that center, church schoolroom. Then we're a young couple. The fellow was more of a draft dodger or a hippie, something had avoided the war. He arrived later than we did. He and his young wife, just too young, a young couple lived there. Then a widow with a sister and a lady with 2 daughters and a sister lived in the next house. None of the men in our village were probably older than, Two of us were born in 41. The rest of them were born just before the war. And any of them that had that were old enough to be drawn into Hitler Youth, generally we never seen any of them. Some of them came later on. We had a significant class of people in that sense. But to go around the village, there was not a single adult man at the start. So it was called Viva Darb. Viva means widows, a village for widows only. Whether it was right or wrong is immaterial. It had been decided that to bring all the widows into communities of families was a risk to the structure of society. So they put all the widows in, I believe, 2 or 3 villages. I ended up in a village that was a Viva Darb, no adult men. After a couple of years, an adult male who was a blacksmith, wife, and 3 or 4 children moved in. They worked in the village for a couple of years. They never got paid for any of their work because nobody had any money, so eventually they had to go somewhere where they actually got paid. I got a job with him when I was about 11, I think, 10 or 11. So for a while I became a blacksmith at that age. And it was almost all of the work was done through sheet metal. So we had those, the wagon wheels were basically wood and then held together, pieces of wood held together by a blade. That was then welded together. Interesting question to me that I never got a decision on is, of course, you had to have the measurement perfect. They'd lay the blades, the end of the blades over until they were almost white hot, red, almost white hot. Then they were hammered, and broken glass bottles were placed on it, continuously hammered in. I don't think any compounds, elements transported into them. I don't think it became part of the metal. I think it was probably what do you call, something that helped something else to bind, but it didn't go into it itself. Forgot that. But I never figured out why glass was used to bind metals. A major product that was shears for plows. The plows ran into stumps frequently, obstacles, and the coarse sand that was plowed wore them down really, really fast. The sharpness was gone really quick. So they had to be repounded, reshaped constantly, and that's what we did. A single fellow, Anru, came and joined us, his family. They found the family in Siberia somewhere, and they eventually were found to be not having survived. He joined, he was a carpenter, and he generously helped out here and there where he could, but of course also, you can't get paid when there's no money. Our days were generally...
So would that be just like an exchange of services? What would you barter for if you needed something?
If there was something you could trade, some of us were given, MCC sent us a tiny allotment to get something like seed or some necessities. I don't know what it was. I was too young to care. And I'd already been used to simply saying, Mom looks after it, Mom looks after it. Oh, kids, we don't have anything to eat today. Next day, well, we got kefir that we hammered into grain, and we cooked that, but today we don't have milk, we don't have sugar, you're just going to have to eat it the way it is. Next day, well, today we're not going to have any food, but you can go and eat some peanuts. But eventually we did get a little trickle of food supplied. I don't know the method. I was too young to care. And none of us got a job, so we weren't at 10 or 12. We could travel along with anyone, with our dads or other uncles to find out how it worked, help them go, fetch it, etc. It just happened. We were that isolated. We were probably half a day by horse to get to our center, the center of our colony. 23 villages. And one colony was a little extra large, which had a cooperative store. Eventually it had a school, central school from 7 to 10, I believe, 6 or 7 to 10. And they eventually, a couple of years in, they brought a tractor and a sawmill. So if we were lucky, we'd get a couple planks now and then from there, but we'd have to transport it from there. It was a terrible, terrible trip because you had wagons that had no springs on them, solid wheels, solid bar underneath it. The rattling would just simply rattle your vertebrae apart. You'd go crazy at time eventually, because you know when you're moving along, little dip and it gets bigger so quick when you drive over it, and one little rain and they're big holes. So getting back to our little village there, we each had a small well. and there was a deeper well out, something probably a kilometer outside the village. Our little wells ran dry periodically. We then have to drive out to get water from some center of the out in the wilderness, bring in a few buckets. I remember one time, Mum would do the farm work. My grandmother was too feeble by then to do any work other than help some cooking and babysit Frida. I don't ever remember. I hardly remember anything that happened at home. I'd get up if my mom had something that I could do. If not, I picked up my slingshot and barefoot, find myself a stick and head out in the bush. About half a mile or so was the length of our field. Then across a barbed wire fence, and then beyond that was common property. And I remember that literally all my time down there was wandering by myself through the woods. I found a little tin can one time, and the string, tied a string to the little tin can, put it on my trousers, and if I shot a bird and found a mud hole where there was some water, I'd put some water in my tin can. Maybe or not, I'd be able to make a fire, cook me a little bird in a tin can. One of the more enjoyable moments was when I came across a beehive. They would sometimes be quite low and sometimes high up in the tree, and usually very painful to get the honey out of them. So I would wander off, and I rarely knew what my mom did, but she was in the field weeding at those and looking after the plants. She would have me carry water, so I would fetch water in the mornings and later on in the day. If we watered only the peanuts and some vegetables that we had. We'd come across the seed. Watermelons were absolutely the greatest thing that we learned to handle. They were beautiful and they grew well and they needed very little water. It was absolutely heaven to have a watermelon. So I would sometimes come from a day of wandering, and we never carried water. We went through 140-degree temperatures all day long, never drinking anything. We never carried water. We didn't have the containers.
Yeah, true.
So after spending a day in the bush and then coming back in the field, you look at the watermelon patch there, and you dive into it. Big little watermelon, bang across your knee. It opened up. You slurped this quick, and then the centerpiece, which was the delicious solid piece, and then scoop out the sides. Wash your face, and then of course, as soon as you washed your face, you'd have an endless amount of flies and bees chasing you the rest of the way home.
Wow.
The peanuts took some care, but it was a wonderful plant. For one thing, it had a foliage around, a bunch of foliage, sort of like cabbage, and the animals loved it. You could feed them fresh. You could dry it and hold it for the off season. So it was a very useful plant. So we nurtured it with great care. It took a lot of effort. We had to shore it up constantly. The wind would whip away the sand, the soil around the roots, so we'd have to cover the roots repeatedly so that the nuts could grow in the ground. And then, of course, when it came to harvesting, dig our fingers very deep down so we wouldn't lose any peanuts, filter, shake them, and precious little thing, carry it into our barn. We ended up having a very nice barn. I forget just when we got it and how we acquired it, but we did have one, which served all purpose, as you can imagine. Kaffir was useless except for, not even the stems. It was probably this high. Not even the stems and the leaves were edible, not even for the animals. But we broke off the tips, the tops, and shook it out, beat the hell out of it to get the grain, and then some for us, some for the animals. It got spread around. The cotton. For me, cotton was sort of precious. It was easier to plant. It grew on one stem, spread out, and then as the nut itself, as it popped open, big fluffy white, most beautiful cotton popped out. We had a very short time to harvest it, so everybody was in the fields working from as long as daylight. I was never good with picking anything from strawberries to peanuts, etc. I was lucky. I always get the job to go from picker to picker, gather all the buckets or little blankets. If you take blankets, spread it out, put the cotton, tie the corners together. So I would be constantly going from row to row, picking these up and carry them to the house, back and forward. I was happy as a lark doing this thing. All day long. We actually, as soon as the crop was picked, the leaves fell. we believed we had to, and I think we're probably right, insects would lay their larvae, their egg, into the bark of a cotton stem, and then the insect would die. Those things would remain for the winter off season, and in spring they'd pop out by the millions, and they'd clean the field off. Nothing left. Desert
like locusts.
Yeah.
These were locusts, or they were?
No. These were insects, crawly thing, insects. So as soon as the harvest was off, Mom says, "Okay, field is yours." So with a shovel, spade, I had the privilege to go row after row and chop them off just at the ground level, just below the ground level, and I got into the momentum of chopping, creating a pile, chopping and creating a pile. Around the village, everyone did the same thing, make a pile, light it. I thought we need a little more drama. So Mom came out one day and says, "What in the world are you doing?" "Well, I want a big fire, not a whole lot of little ones." "But don't be silly." "Well, okay." So she gave me a week or two to gather the whole field, roll it all up into one pile. So waited until the sun was setting, and then I lit it, and it was a monstrous fire. You had to, of course, burn them to kill the insects, the larvae inside. Enormous fire, which shocked a lot of people, came over, and it was almost turned into a party.
How old would you have been when you remember this?
11.
Oh, yeah.
10, 11, 12.
I think it's crazy thinking about your childhood there, and to your point that you had mentioned, you mentioned this earlier when we were talking before on video, that like kids that were older than you were likely drafted into the military, while, I don't know how many children were younger than you, but
really interesting point. I don't want to let it go, but can I go back to the cotton for 1 minute?
Yeah.
We would, and we'd address the Indian side of it as well whenever you like. But when it came to picking cotton, we recruited as many people as possible. And there were Indians wandering around outside the villages. We invited them to come, and for a day's work, they'd get a slice of bread or something of that type. And I'd established a pretty good relationship with one elderly native who always came from every morning. Well, when he'd come to the village, he would come into the village across the fields. First stop was our place, and we'd sit, we'd chat, and then he'd wander off, or he'd say, "Etch, ik, etch, halt, haka, I will chop wood for a slice of bread." So that would be how the day began. So since we were surrounded by the least motivated tribe of natives, we'll get to the other side later, they also behaved that way, and which was shocking to us quite a lot. They would come sometimes, usually a few men at a time, sometimes a group, and I never figured out, there were some young 20-ish, I don't know, no idea, women wrapped in sacks, and they would walk by, and just as they walked by, they'd just stand there, spread their legs, and just pee on the ground, which for a Mennonite kid, with all the naivety, having grown up with people, you see nothing but their ankles, right? Covered from head to toe. This is a terrible shock. And it was, of course, no idea of how to react to it. Is this an insult? Is it a message? What is it? And yet, they were so blatant. One of the ladies, who was one of the Indian women, disappeared while we were doing cotton. She disappeared for an hour or two, and then came back and continued to pick cotton. Question went around, well, for me, because I noticed that to some extent, because I was wandering through them constantly. What'd she do? Where'd she go? Oh, she went into the bush. She had a baby. And she said she already had two. She couldn't look after anymore. Grabbed it by the legs, hit the head on a stump, dug a little hole under a tree stump, covered it with sand, and went back to pick cotton. I wanted to get this story in before we get to...
Yeah.
That was the level of... what we call lengua was the name of that tribe. They were homeless. Generally, they would find spots where city, villages, wherever a group of people would settle down, a family or so, they would always live on the peripheral and see what kind of pickings they could get, or the garbage would throw off, and they would live on the waste and the odd slice of bread.
Wow.
Those were the lingo. Amongst the lingo, I had a particular friend who disturbed me one day, really big time. And it was so, I was just laughing inside and so pissed off at the same time. They noticed that when Mennonites visit Mennonites, the custom is, you make a cup of tea, you sit down, you haul out a slice of bread, and if we're lucky enough to have some cake or so, you'd serve the best. Sometimes you may come across a little chocolate, make chocolate milk. You'd serve the best around the table. And he'd been watching this for a while, puzzling, thinking this thing through, we called it they come and spazieren. They come to visit. So one day he comes. I have a hammock strung overhang by the house, probably self-made, but a wonderful little hammock. I was very proud of it. The only hammock that we had. He settles himself in the hammock, and I look, really? You really going to do that? So I sit on a piece of clay, and he talks casually, very quite pompously. And I thought, this looks pretty good on you, son of a bitch. You pushed me out of my bed, now you're taking it. All these wonderful little emotions running through him. He puts his feet high and his hands behind his head. Ich komme spazieren. Nicht haltaken. I come spazieren. He went like this, looked in the kitchen. Brot? So he was saying, I've come for a visit. Not to chop wood today. I come for a visit. Then he stretched his neck. Spazieren. Brot? Bread or something to eat. Well, it went off really nicely. We remained good friends. I kept that picture in my mind. Such a delightful moment.
It's funny.
Maybe we could skip the Indians and the crop. Anything on the crop you wanted to know? Maybe the locust attack.
I mean, I just wanted to kind of paint a picture in my mind of just what the life was like there, and because I know you had a lot of adventures. Were you going to school? Did you go to school? Because you were free to.
Okay. Yeah. Let me touch on that on one point. The school would begin at sunrise or earlier, fairly early. It was for a couple hours so that the kids could get back home. So the kids would go to school for a couple hours, and then by noon they'd be home, and then they'd be home working on Saturday. And no, maybe I don't know whether we had to. No, we didn't take Saturday off. The water was extremely scarce. We had one well. We had to allocate it all the time. One day I got home in the middle of the afternoon and decided I was going to start watering. I went to the well and lowered the rope, lowered the bucket, and I heard a click. I flipped the rope to make the bucket jump, because you flick it, the bucket jumps, goes sideways, and then the water runs into it, then up you go. I flicked it a few times. I could hear the sound on solid material. Really puzzled. Never experienced that before. So
it ran dry. It ran dry.
It was dry. So I waited when the sand passed over and the ray hit the bottom. I could see one side, the sand was quite high, a little bit of water down on one side. So Frida was home. I don't know how old we were, but I must have been 10 or 11, 12ish perhaps, 10ish. Frida was home, and Oma was not there, and Mum was in the field somewhere. I didn't know where. So there was that rope that I used for the bucket, and I tested, and I thought, yeah, I think it can hold me. But how can I get down there? So I tested and looked down there, and I'd never seen anyone crawl in or out. But with tremendous anxiety, I stepped into the well, braced my feet on one end, and it was shorter than my feet to my bum, so it was very convenient. I could put my feet there, my back on this side, and I felt quite safe there. So after tinkering around and wondering what risks I was taking, I dropped down a foot at a time, and then I began to admire the workmanship. Never seen anything so beautifully, so precise. You know how boards get cut, board, and then grooved on both sides, grooved, and then an angle sliced so that when you set one into the other, they lock into each other, and they have no power. They have enormous power of pressure on the outside. So when the soil shifts weight on it, it can never collapse because it's the way the cut is. Now with soil firmly packed in on the outside, I managed to get lower and lower, and it was a hardwood, beautiful hardwood, and I thought the craftsmanship was, that's more beautiful than furniture we had. When I got to the bottom, it occurred to me that wherever there is water, wherever there is little shelters, etc., that's where frogs and scorpions and snakes live. So now I'm sitting a few feet above the water, and I don't dare to put my feet down. I don't know whether the sand will hold me. The sand I could test, but with my toe.
Yeah.
Tapped the sand. It was quite compact. I looked between the cracks in the bottom where the water had flown out, but now it's just shadow. And I thought, who's lurking in there? And this must have taken an hour or two of exploration on my part. All of a sudden, I hear a deathly scream. My mom was up there looking down, and she saw me at the bottom of the well, and she exploded in fear. What are you doing down there? Yeah, okay, well, no water, look. So we then began filling the metal bucket filled it with sand. We had no expertise. We couldn't ask anyone. We were all coming from Europe, beat up as hell, and none of us had ever dug a well. So I would fill the bucket, and my mom would crank it up, empty it, and fill and bang. So we spent, I don't know how long, a day or two, and managed to get down, and the water started running again. Perhaps because the sand, we got the sand down, and the moisture, the little rivers, the trickling of water replaced it, and we were back in business.
Wow. Yeah.
Experimenting, trial and error. Our whole lives down there was trial and error. Everything was trial and error.
Yeah. So, at what point did you decide you wanted to start trying to break in horses?
We began with a slug of a horse. He didn't like to work, and he didn't like anything else. But we went to auctions where the rumors began that us newcomers, we were trading watches that didn't work for horses that didn't work and for cows that wouldn't give milk. And the early animals that we bought were basically such. They hadn't been trained to work. They were not fit for work. They were too sick to work. Cows may give a little milk when they had calves. We fought over, should we use the milk or should we feed the calf? So initially that was all trial and error as well. But the second horse that Mom acquired, and I don't know how, her name was Shushka. It was a desert rat. It was mean, nervous, hyper. I guess it never had a good moment in its life, so it was angry all the time. Every time I got close to it, it was angry and I was angry. But life was so boring that I was going to ride it if I had to kill it or get killed in the process. When my mom wasn't there, it was time for me to ride this thing. So I approached the horse, and it would snort, and it would face me, and the backside would always, like a magnet, run away from me. Mm-hmm. So it would not let me approach her. So I tried to figure out between fences, barbed wire, to wedge her in somehow. And as soon as I got her wedged in, I'd throw myself on her. She'd be running while I was still hanging on with one arm and one with a heel. She'd be galloping off, and I'd pull myself slowly on top of her, and she'd bolt. So I would try and control her. The harnesses that we had, I had a rope or a belt, and I would put that over her nose or through her mouth, and then choke her on the bottom. And all I could do was pull. It would come on one side around the neck, so I push against the neck or reach out and tug it that way, trying to direct a little bit. This thing, blind and deaf, it paid no attention to me. It just ran. So I decided that, okay, you want to run? I'm going to run you to death. I am going to run you to death out of the village into a prairie-like field. And I beat on it, and I gave it the spurs, and it flew like it was like an arrow. It was wild and beautiful in the run. But I thought it would tire, exhaust, die perhaps before we hit the forest, the cactus-packed forest. Didn't die, didn't slow down. So this wouldn't have been my first ride, but we had the battle for a while. But this time I was really determined to break the horse. So we got into the forest, and I fought as hard as I could to pull it back. I wondered if I should jump off, because I knew the trail was zigzaggy, such as cattle and animals run. They don't run in straight lines. And I thought, no, I'm not going to jump. I'm going to beat her, and I'm going to run her into the cactus tree. I'm going to kill her. So we were like a skier, zooming, shushing around cactus trees and these stingy bushes and so on, zigzagging through there. And I thought, how long is this going to last? We came around one curve, and here is a cow standing right across us. It's behind against the cactus tree. Its head high up, grazing on a bush, fresh growth on the top of a bush, and there's no way around it. I wanted to laugh at that point. Hit her, jump, nah, no time for nothing. I gave one big tug on the jaw of the horse, gave it the spur, jump, you crazy, whatever, right? Well, the horse this was the first time that our thoughts meshed. The horse had the same idea, I'm going to jump. And I gave a good try. It went up, and up in the air, and I can see its hooves just below its chest, hitting the backbone of the cow. And that's the last thing I saw, because I went off like a rocket. The horse stopped in midair. I went like a rocket straight forward, head into the dirt. My head turned sideways. As I hit the dirt in the corner of my eye, I could see the horse almost upside down, with its feet up in the air as the cow crumbles. And the cow disappears under the crumble. I see very little of it. But the horse rolls over the cow. It comes down behind me, my heels, rolls over me with its backbone across my chest, and all the way over my head, and snorting and kicking, it jumps up and spins in a circle, dizzy and confused and in a rage, or just plain confused. I get up slowly, and I wipe the blood off my face, out of my eye, because couldn't even see. But as I stood up more or less, I realized there was no breathing. My lungs had collapsed. That horse had gone over my back, and I was young teenagers by then, 12, 13 probably. That horse had squashed my lungs flat, dead. There was no breathing. I was standing, leaning over, and my mouth was going, biting in the air, and I couldn't get anything down. It got darker and darker. I saw the horse like a shadow beside me, and I just crumbled. Came to, got what seemed a little thin line of air, a little gasp of air, just enough to open my eyes, stand up halfway, no breathing, down again. I have no idea how many times I went up and down, but an interesting thing occurred to me in the process, and that is when your lungs are flat and are empty, and they're squished. They don't take any air in. The body is so wonderfully made. When the nerves relax, they soothe, they relax, and then they stimulate breathing. And as they return some moisture into the lungs, the lungs relax, and before too long, if you don't get a breath, of course you're dead. But before too long, you get this kind of it's like that. But by doing that, you do scratching, you start coughing, and you get a tiny bit of a bite, tiny bit of air in with coughing and you relax, you get a little air in, and then you become conscious. As you're fully conscious, the nerves set in again. You know you're in bad shape. Tighten up the breathing. No breath, no breath, no breath. You blank out and down you go. You come to after being not conscious, and then out again when you're conscious. And it's the play of the nerves in the body. Spectacular thing. It served me when I was 40 and drowned, etc. Served me years after that. So eventually I began to breathe a little. And the horse, we hated each other, and now suddenly we were both caught in this trap. I walked slowly towards the horse, reaching out, and it just reared back, and no way. Constantly stayed within roughly 10 feet of me, a little less 10 feet. I go towards it, it moved back, constantly staying. Tried again to reach him, no way. I start walking home, and it followed me like a puppy home. All the way home, I had to walk all the way home, and that beast, it probably wished me dead all along, but it followed me all the way home, but I had to walk all the way.
It wanted the satisfaction of watching you.
Yeah. We suddenly melded into friendship, which didn't last until the next day, though.
No?
No.
Still just it went back to normal, or?
We both returned to normal, yeah.
Okay.
So this was Shushgad. We kept it for quite a while. Shall we stay on horses for a minute?
I was going to ask about the broken arm. I remember, and I thought that might have been the broken arm.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I was a little older then, maybe 14-ish. Mm-hmm. And we had, this is a Sunday afternoon, two other boys, I believe it was two, and I, with slingshots and slings, we went into the forest, what we called hunting, which was usually try and catch a bird, catch one, shoot one, climb up trees, look into the nests that hollowed out in dead wood, sometimes eagles, but usually parrots. Sometimes we'd find a honey nest and feast on it. So there was nothing to do. In a village like that, there's nothing to do. So you go kind of crazy by searching for things to do. Well, we were a good chunk into no man's or common property. When the horses were not worked, they were turned loose. And they would wander considerable distances, but they normally, quite often, they'd come back on their own, because that's where food was and where they were used to shelter. We saw some horses in the distance, and it occurred to me, nothing else to do, let's ride them. Well, one of the fellows wasn't too crazy about it. He says, well, you see that horse there? I want to ride that one. Well, we try to catch it, there's no way of catching it. So again, I was already accustomed. You direct the horses into if there's barbed wire, into anything that will contain them. So there was some cross logs there and a log here. We cornered the horse there. I got on the log behind and back of it, and I jumped on the horse, and didn't really appreciate that, so it took off. And it was a beautiful horse. It could run. It went full bore across the entire prairie field. And I thought, yeah, no. When you're tired, you're going to slow down, and then I'll jump off. I'm not going to jump off. Just run. Just as I got really afraid of running into the forest again, because that usually meant a lot of pain, I saw a trail crossing at a 90-degree our path, our imaginary path. That was a real path. We were just flying across the plain. I thought, no, you don't. But I didn't have a bridle. I couldn't steer the horse. No, don't. That was my last thing I thought about. And the horse sees the trail. It does a 90-degree so smoothly, so fast. I went straight head first forward, hit some logs, and I was out, sort of. By the time I picked myself up and shook it off, oops, something not right. This hand works, this arm works, but this one doesn't. I had a hard time maneuvering around, so I tried to move this thing. I grabbed it and I moved it. It was quite painful, but I was dulled at the time. It wouldn't move. It wouldn't move up and down. I couldn't do anything with it. So, well, it's a long walk home. We better start walking home, which we did when I got home on a Sunday afternoon. My mom was inside in the room. She was mending something. Mm-hmm. So I slowly walked in the room, stood with my back against the wall and my arm behind me. She hears me coming in, and then she hears nothing, and then she says, "Herman, what you doing?" "Nothing." "Come here." "No, nothing." Sounds different. She looks at me. "What's the matter?" "Nothing." "Pull your arm from behind you." "Nope." She says, this is not normal. She jumps up, comes forward. "Show me the arm." "Nope." Well, she was a lot stronger than I was. So she moved me off that wall and held my arm around, hauled it forward, and it wouldn't move. It was a 90 degree, and it stayed 90 degree. So the joint had popped. This bone had sort of, the two bones here, one here, a jab between those two bones, and was frozen. So what are we going to do? There's no doctor, no bone doctor. We inquired. The village, the doctor of our colony, which is 23 villages over a whole big territory. There's one central village, Hauptstadt, half city, where there's a hospital, but we inquired, there's no doctor. He'd returned to Germany for some upgrading or some vacationing. Wouldn't be back for weeks. So we thought, well, maybe a nurse. We packed our bags and traveled what I think was probably most of the night to what we call a hospital there. It was an examination, and then some doctor assistant showed up, and he looked at that. No, he says, "I don't think anybody can do something." So what we could do is either just tie it to a sticks crisscross, the common way of,
like a sling.
Yeah. Well, no, a rugged piece to hold it prevent it from moving, and then hold that in a sling.
Yeah.
Okay, tie it up. So he says, "Well, it's probably going to have to be sawed off, but probably if you're willing to wait some weeks until the doctor comes home, we'll just keep on tying it up, or we teach you to tie it up." So for weeks, I ran around with this thing tied up. The pain was gone. It healed, got solid. I could move it this way, off and on, with the cast on it. Mm-hmm. Doctor finally came there 6 weeks or so later, 8 weeks later, and he looked it over. He shook his head. He says, "Send them out." So they start talking, and my mom tells me later on, after examination, the doctor says, "It doesn't even help. I can fix it. No, I can't fix it. I think we should probably saw it off. But what good would it do to fix? Look out the window." Mom looked out the window, and I was halfway up a tree, fighting kids, some 10, 20 feet up in the air. Says, "If I fix it, if I try to fix it, it's set very loosely. It won't hold anyway. Just look at him. What kind of kid you got?" Well, my mom freaked. I got tossed back in the wagon. We hurried home. Rumors were passed around. Where is a bone doctor? And one of the oldest colonies in Paraguay had a Russian woman who was reportedly had a very wonderful natural skill of healing. Mom said, "That's where we're going to go." It was a massive trip. So horse and big wagon and straw in the back, and we wandered. We started driving off a couple days. We got there late one day, and she was an angel, jubilant. She was a spirited girl. Ignored me completely. Poured tea for everyone. Told jokes, told stories. Everybody was whipped up and laughing and joking. She was so skilled, marvelous. And I looked at them all. You can laugh as long as you keep laughing, because I ain't going to be laughing. Whatever's coming up, I'm not going to join you laughing. For me, it's going to be pain. So I just thought pain, and sat still. After maybe an hour, she said, "Well, why don't we look at the young man and his problems?" Here's a big chair. It was a torture chair. I think that's how you kill people. So she put me in that chair. Okay, let me just see. She unwrapped it and put my arm on the ends like that. Okay, just keep holding it there. Relax it. Now you sit over on his lap here. You behind him. You pin his arm behind the chair, and you sit on the shoulder here. And I thought, whoa, this is going to hurt. I thought, I'm not even going to wait until it hurts. I threw my head back and I let out a wild animal scream. And as I screamed, she just plunk. She yanked it apart, straightened it out, massaged it for a while, and I don't even remember any pain. She says, "We'll just leave it that way. We'll put for some reason, goose fat was considered to be very healing and smooth, etc., etc. So she says, we'll rub goose fat in the arm and keep it lubricated and keep it massaging. Put a loose sling around. Now, don't do anything stupid. Off you go with the kids. Then my mom came back and says, can't take you home. You're going to stay here for a couple of weeks. Yeah. Oh, wow. I thought that was great. At home, there was my old grandma who could hardly get around. Frida, who was too shy. If I told her, here, take the horse, lead the horse, well, she walked backwards. She was scared the horse would step on her heels, so she led it backwards. Mom was looking after finding something for us to eat. Now I'm going to stay in a family with over 20 children. And this little mama who has the energy of, I mean, she was, well, they had a farm, they had all kinds of horses, they were not poor, they were well provided for. So they'd already had a wonderful life. But here I'm going to live on a big loft, an upper part of the barn with a dozen kids, freedom galore, everything functioning beautiful. I was so excited that I could stay. Next day I see the little old lady, I mean that affectionately, sitting in a big rocking chair, and she's crocheting. She says, hey Susie, you take your little sister so-and-so, and the other one, the baby so-and-so. You three go down the street to Mrs. So-and-so and see if she's okay. Give her a hand fixing up the house. You take so-and-so and so, and you go down to the church, somewhere else. Three of the bigger kids were helping the father, which I think I only saw once. She allocated like a general. She dictated every aspect of life from her rocking chair. She never moved. I was so impressed. I thought, what a wonderful scene. So a week goes by, and nothing much happens. These people are so calm and so quiet. The lady turns to me, Herman, the boys are going to go and get the horses, and there must have been a dozen horses. So you got to go out beyond our fields into no man's land, into open fields, and you're going to bring back a dozen or so horses. Awesome. Quite excited. Off we go. We round up the horses, and the fellas, one or two of them are going to lead their horses back. A couple fellas get on these tired old nags, and they walk. I says, is there one that, you can have that one. That one can hardly walk. Yeah, but you'd be safe on it. Can you get me something with a little more spirit? Well, you could have that one, but that one hasn't really been broken well. So I get one of them. I argue until I get one that looks pretty good. So I get on it, and we're walking back to the village, and I couldn't believe it. Walk when there's horses there? And this was just churning and boiling inside me. I want the horse to run, but I can't just have it run away on them. So I pull back until I'm behind them all, and I think, well, maybe I'll just get a little speed going, and maybe they'll all follow in. Well, the moment I gave this thing a slap on the back, it jumped out and it took off, and all of the horses took off at the same time. Horses cannot hear the thumping of their hooves, other horses' hooves on the ground. They spook like geese do when they hear a screaming when the whole flock rises. So this whole contraption, it picks up and it starts running, and then they start racing, and I'm maybe 30, 50 feet in front of them. I try to steer this horse to the side, not possible. In front of us is a mole colony, and I know moles have deep holes. Yeah. I can't run onto that. The horse is going to break its legs. I try my best. I can't. Right into the middle. It goes down, up, hops a couple times, hops, and I go ahead, ass over tea kettle, roll, do a couple somersaults, and everybody scatters. Home they go, and I tag along, and we get to home, and she says, good God. Anyway, she says nothing much beyond that. Some 20 years later, she contacts my mom. And then my mom years later, she contacted my mom, and my mom told me the story here in Canada. Years later, she says, that lady says, I cannot take anything from you for having Herman here for a couple of weeks. She says, I just can't take anything from you. We have, what is the ailing of having no enthusiasm, no excitement? There's sort of a mellow something or other, as illness. No enthusiasm. Nobody shouts, nobody sings, nobody wrestles.
Apathetic?
Well, yeah, that was described them, but that's not the condition. It's a medical condition.
Or lethargic?
Lethargy amongst older children. She says, I can't charge you anything for that. She says, since those kids came riding into the village, as over tea kettle, etc., my kids have never been the same. They begin to joke and kick each other, wrestle and laugh, and be playful like they had never been before. So if anything, I owe you something, just take the kid home and tell him not to do it again. So that was my elbow break.
Pause there. What would you say is one of the core memories that you remember the most of when you were in Paraguay as a kid?
The attack of the locusts was as if it was beyond this earth. It was something inconceivable. It was massive. It was disturbing emotionally. So that was a major story, and the destruction was terrible. For a kid, of course, one of the races that I snuck away from the village, making sure that mom never knew that it had happened, and I traveled across miles to get to a local horse race and entered that with an unbelievable horse. That to me is a dear story, but it's a big one. I think the locusts are a phenomena. As life normally goes, the worst experience is listening to a preacher in the church when it's 140 degrees. The guy's got a grade 3 education. He can barely read, and he doesn't have the resources to come to explain it. So he reads a section of the Bible and then goes, "Oh, wonderful, how wonderful, just think how wonderful. I don't have the words to add to it, so I'll just read it again." And by the time he reads it 5 times, you want to kill him. That would be one of the horror stories.
Yeah.
You can't blame him for being uninformed.
Yeah.
But it's torture for a child. Torture for anybody. When the temperatures are 140, there's no glass, there's no screens. So the school is the wind, sometimes sandstorm whips in across the church. Then they bolt the windows shut. You don't have fresh air. You sit in there, and these preachers can talk. The less they say, the longer they talk. So they can talk endlessly by repeating themselves, and you torture the people half to death. You want to die. I don't care whether they go to heaven or hell, but just let this cop pass me. Good Lord. The attack of the loaders was like a spiritual attack that was inconceivable to us, to the animals. The cows ran into the village from way out in the fields. Horses were spinning, pounding the ground, snorting. Cows were giving off groaning sounds that we'd never heard before. The dogs whimpered, twisted around your legs, tripping you, trying to find some security. And yet that rumble in the sky is like chariots or like bombers flying in during the war with heavily loaded with ammunition, with bombs, and just rumbling on. And nothing you can't see, you can't hear, you can't perceive anything, but you hear the rumble. And then there's a shadow rising in the sky, and it's got a straight line, like a penciled straight line in front of it. You can't see it, but you can see it's growing. You can see it growing, but it's so slow you can't see the motion. Mm-hmm. When it was overhead, it was so thick, like 20, 30 feet of locusts, it blanked out the sun. And then they all came down, and within an hour, everything that grew, our crops were all gone. Now that is dramatic.
It's like biblical. Think about like the Moses story.
Yeah, it's biblical proportions, the 7, whatever they call that, yeah, disasters. Ants were pests. They were always there. As a 6, 7-year-old, we received a tin can saying that this is going to help you with the pests, with the ants. So I wandered in the field, and here I saw, they had a trail maybe that wide, quite long, fire red ants. They were real killer war ants type of ants. And they were just streaming along from some nest that they had deep underground, and they created a clay underground from all the stuff that they brought in. Zigzagging and then up a tree somewhere, and they snip that tree down, a particular tree that they like the fungus off, the juice, and the bugs that grew on that thing that they culture. They'd snip it off, and marvelous to see. He was one big little son of a bitch, and he had a tree, a log about that long, right? Just have it in himself. So he struggled. He got it on one end, and he tried to lift it up. He lifted it up, braced himself, and then as he got it up, it turned over just a little too far, and upside down. It came down, and the ant was on its back. It wouldn't let go, but let go of the stem. But it hung on tight. So the stem was basically lifting the ant into the air. So it worked to get it back, and then had to stand. As long as standing straight, it could walk. But if it got pushed one way or the other by wind or by another ant, it would just go boom, and then he had to struggle to rise it again. They were marvelously simplistic creatures. They only had, they were motivated. They had only one way: forward, up the trees, chop it down, and they would wander back and forth on the same trail and just hauling the trees down underground. There were 2 of these that I saw fairly close. I followed them. I looked at the tree and so on. I followed where they were closest together, and I knew they weren't good for a crops. So I put an X between them. And I picked up a couple and threw them in the enemy territory. I didn't know it was enemy yet. Just from one line into the other. And immediately the warrior ants, their heads went high, their antennas were flickering, searching for the foreign object, and then dive on it and cut it to pieces. I put a stem, so kind of a tree log, and directed them together. And then I watched the war going on, and the war lasted the rest of the day. They were falling all over each other and chopping away at each other. As I said, the next day, there were 6 inches of mostly dead ones. They were all in the process of dying. They've been chopped to pieces.
It's brutal. I feel like
brutality was, I called one, of course, the Nazis, the other the commies, and I didn't really regret them getting eaten up. But
yeah, it's brutal. One of the stories that I feel has stuck with me the longest is you're running through the jungle. I believe it was storming. You couldn't see anything. It was pitch black, just between the thunder, and then you saw the reflection of your face in the mirror.
2 stories, but they can well be melded together. I knew there was a cabin somewhere way out in the woods. I knew of it, I heard of it, and I was really curious. When I got to it one day, it was already late, it was a thunderstorm, lightning. The lightnings down there was like magic. They were so phenomenal. The earth would rattle. You didn't need a massage after the thunder and lightning. You were limbered up right down to the last atom of your body. Beautiful. If you didn't have fear of it. So one night I came across this abandoned cabin. I don't remember where, for all I know it was still in Germany, I don't know.
Oh.
I was really small. So the cabin fascinated me, and for the moment there was nobody around, and it was dark and thunder and lightning, and I was scared of an empty room. I thought, well, any kind of animal could be there. Even some old grizzly might live there with a knife or whatever, but hypnotized by it. I pushed the door a little, I tapped my toes on the floor. Floor was creaky and shifty, but enough to carry me. So gradually I moved through it, and I saw at the other end there was a little window, and there was a little light, moonlight, streaming into that window across the room. So I thought I'd make my way to that window, listening really carefully and tapping very gently my way forward. I get to look. I get there. My face moves slowly into the light of the moon, and out of the wall, out of the black wall, leaps an image of a terrified person, straggly hair, scruffy, black and white, shadowy, straight at me. I freaked. I was never more scared than that. I found that it was a mirror. The moonlight had hit my face, and that yellowish, dimmish kind of moonlight accentuates a face not in clear lines, but in a diabolical sense, lots of shadows and a lot of darkness. And that darkness was reflected from a mirror that I didn't know was there. But I was in front of that mirror, and it reflected that image back at me, and I thought I was in a dead room, and there was a ghost there, and it was me.
I think my whole life, I've looked at mirrors and just kind of, whenever I've seen like a face in a mirror, whichever, I've just, something about that story lives in my subconscious, where I'll see a mirror and I'll be a little spooked, and I'll second guess it a little bit. I don't know, I guess I just thought about that a whole lot, where it almost haunted me, the image of being alone in a room and seeing that face looking back at you.
We heard a lot of superstitious stories because, being wandering people without a solid history, or with a very fragmented history, one of the stories was that if you hold a mirror here and a mirror there, and if you look in the mirror exactly at midnight, you will see an endless corridor, and you'll see the devil walking through the corridor. I held that picture in my mind, and then I began to experiment with mirrors. And it's very interesting. When you hit the mirrors directly against each other, you see an endless corridor. Mm-hmm. When you now play with the light and shadows, you get an amazing amount of configuration or not normal senses about it. Mm-hmm. You can see yourself hundreds of times, 100, whatever, a limitless number of times, as the mirror reflects your face back and forward. Mm-hmm. And when you already have a spooky story, and then a spooky event like that jumps at you, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So that story was younger. Was when you were trapped in the pitch black? That was in Paraguay, wasn't it?
I was really young. It could have been. It might have been before Paraguay. Yeah.
Oh, really?
That one. The other one was Paraguay.
I just always associated jungle to Paraguay. I never really thought too much of jungle to Germany.
No. This would have been a cabin in the woods, and in Germany and Europe, the cabin in the woods would be more frequent, and would be more likely that I would be there by myself. There would be few cabins in Paraguay.
So I didn't kind of blend those two stories in together. I think maybe there just wasn't a whole lot of significance to the other story, but I just remember the story of you standing in the forest and waiting, thunder hitting, and then you having to take a picture in your mind of everything that was there, move forward until you were completely disconnected to your environment, like wait for lightning to hit, and then just continue moving through the jungle, the forest, like that. I think when I was younger, I even played around with that idea where I'd be in the forest and I'd have my eyes shut and I'd open my eyes real quick, and then I would try to remember where I am and going.
It was for me. It was quite wonderful. A very memorable moment. It had happened that I came home quite late. Bad weather was setting in. Mother wasn't there. Frida, my grandmother, wasn't there. I walked through the house. Bad weather setting in, and I looked around. Nothing to do. I decided that I was going to walk to the neighboring village. My cousin Heinz Schmidt lived in the neighboring village, and somehow I felt I felt like I needed something really a little more exciting that day. So I decided to walk out of the village, which is near half a kilometer or so, and then a couple kilometers through the jungle, and then into their village. So I got started, and the darkness set in massively. By the time I was in the middle, sort of into the jungle, and I knew the trail somewhat. I'd walked it before, but there were obstacles. There was cactus. There were the thunder. When the thunder and lightning set in, the animals in the forest appeared to really spook. I'd expect that they might stand still in the shadow somewhere, but they were on the run. So much was on the run. So much was squeaking and shrieking in the shadows of the woods. It was sort of hypnotizing. Just grabbed me very deeply. Once I got underneath trees, and even when beyond the trees, under the trees, it was so terribly black. And then beyond that, everything was black, but the lightning was so much clearer. I would just have to wait. I could not see anything, not even the bushes beside me. Somewhat, I could see, when trees were above me, I could see the shadows of that against the clouds. So I then waited for the lightning to strike, opening my eyes as much as I could. The lightning struck, I memorized the next 10 or 15 feet, and then I closed my eyes, memorize it, let the memory imprint on my mind, and then with my feet feeling all the spots that I'd memorized. I can walk up to that point. I can't, beyond that, I don't remember. So you stand still until the next strike. And the lightning would strike, and the animals would shriek. You'd hear a crunching in the darkness. Lightning would strike, and at one point a wild pig, or something like a wild pig, fairly small, would just dash across in front of me, bolt across, and be gone.
I can just imagine being paralyzed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There was one moment when you at least didn't have to worry about snakes. They were unlikely, but other like monkeys, they were rare, but the monkeys were shrieking something terrible. Birds of all kinds, they were really noisy. And the parrots, I don't know what kind of birds were screeching in the wild, but they were making their music. And then, I mean, I got to the village and all the lights were out. It was God knows, I mean, walking at 10 feet and waiting and walking 10 feet and waiting. It must have been midnight. Dogs were barking. I couldn't recognize the house I wanted to go to. I wasn't going down up the road. I had crossed through the bush. So I walked in the back of somebody's field, getting closer. The animals started to be getting restless, and there was no light in any of the houses. So I found the house that I thought was it and started knocking on the door. Scared the bejesus out of them. What are you doing here? Crawl out of the bush. First of all, the mental set, the nerve conditions of a child, of a person like me. First, when you think of our wandering, looking for the trains, always with strangers, never with people you know, conditions changing drastically. You run for a train, but the train goes the wrong way. You run for the train, and the train's already accelerating. You got to climb on it in motion. You're waiting for the train, and the bombers are rumbling by, and you hear the ammo go off. Your nervous system is tuned to something different. So when it gets quiet, you can't handle the quiet. Mm-hmm. Even if you have to go out into thunder and lightning, into the woods with torrential rainfall coming down on you. You just do it because this is more comfortable than silence. Mm-hmm. A little weird, but it's got to be taken into that context. Yeah. And the psychology of it is phenomenal. It also tells you about what your dreams, for instance, and your post-traumatic stress syndromes. It's so simplistic, so clear. Our fear as we left when I was 3, leaving my 8 uncles murdered, our parents starved to death. With that in the background, the one fear we had that overshadowed everything. Whether we had food or not, to drink or not, whether we were getting cold or not, the greater fear was when the Russians are coming, there's going to be people going to be hurt and murdered. So with that constantly in the back of my mind, in this core of my mind, I got that from the breast, the vibration of my mum while I was a child, and her brothers were being murdered. Yeah. So I got the vibration from the breast of my mum while the horrors happened. I didn't have to be told anything. It created my nervous system. I was at UBC one time and I had not studied. I'd sloughed off. I was skiing and working, playing. Hadn't prepared myself. The day of exam came. I was terrified. I needed that exam really, really badly. So the night before that, I couldn't get to sleep. I passed out for a bit in sleep, and then I saw a road coming down the hill ahead, a railway crossing like a dam with a rail across the top, and the road passing underneath it. The Russian soldiers were pouring in through that gate, and I ran at them with a sword, and I fought Russians, slicing, stabbing, elbowing, just hitting, and my arm got so tired. It dropped. It's like I couldn't raise it anymore. I couldn't spear him anymore. Down. I stepped back, took a deep breath, and lifted my arm again, and started slicing and stabbing. Went on and on. When I woke up, I was laying in a pool of sweat, and all for an exam that had upset me. But the fear of not passing the exam triggered the Russians are coming. That is post-traumatic stress. The emotion that is created in one situation, when you experience that emotion again somewhere else, then it calls a picture to the new situation. There's no Russians here. There's an exam at UBC and you're always going to get murdered. Yeah. But you're dreaming blood and murder. It's substantial lesson in psychology, I suppose, and insanity.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it makes so much sense, but it's such a wild thing to be in, like to be only maybe like a 20-year-old in Canada doing a test and then dreaming of Russians. I mean, you just can't fathom that in our society day and age.
No, for Canadians who have not been through that stress, I think it's very important that you listen to these stories and understand that is in everybody's soul. And anybody could have experienced that. And the guy that sits next to you may be having that kind of a experience at the moment. You're not going to know it because you can't look into his soul, into his mind. But knowing that it happens and knowing that you can deal with it if you see it happening to somebody else, there's value in it.
Pause there for a second. Let me make sure that my phone hasn't died. Nope, it's still recording. Good.
You want to hear a resource?
A resource?
The race of my lifetime. Pick up something more important than that.
Well, I wanted to.
How we got to Canada, for instance.
Well, I think that there was a. I guess really like. So you were 16 when you were able to make the trip to Canada. How did it even become possible to go to Canada? Because I remember the issue that had happened was your grandmother, my Oma's mother-in-law was sick and unable to go to Canada, but I feel like the ship had sort of sailed. At that point, it wasn't easy to go to Canada, let alone she had no money. And I believe I recall that she had saved as much as she could, and then there was the generosity of someone who helped.
There were no savings, no. But the mom told me later on that an old school friend, a spinster, an old lady, had come from Russia to Canada, to Toronto, and she sent mom a buck or two periodically, and that made life really much more tolerable down there. But the grandmother was the main reason why we couldn't come to Canada from Europe. But we all had this. I was supposedly had the eye specs that was an infection, and that spread wildly. So I was the final risk. The grandmother had gone to Brazil to visit her other daughter, and she died there. So that gave us the opening that we could come to Canada without her. So to open the gate somewhat, I went to see a doctor, and he said, well, I can burn the eyes with an acid and then neutralize it. That should kill any live organisms, right? We thought that was probably a good idea. So not a very good idea because he dripped that acid into my eyes. I had to hold it, and it looked exploded in fire. So painful. Hold it, and they had to hold me down. Then they put a neutralizer on it. Says, okay, son, now you go home. You can go back to basically the dormitory that I stayed in at that time. And I literally collapsed when I left the doctor's office. So I remembered, and I saw shadows. I remember the trail somewhat, and I could see little shadows, but I had to constantly rub and roll my eyes to keep them moist and kill the pain. I got to the street. It was simple enough. And I walked for perhaps a mile with my hands end over hand on razor blade wire to guide myself home. I couldn't see the road. I couldn't see anything. I outlived that, and so did my eyeballs, which was quite amazing. When we went to Asunción to clear to go to Canada, the guy looked at my eyes and says, "You probably never had it. And you don't have it, you probably never had it. But your eyes work, so thank the Almighty that they do." So that was the difficulty that we imagined, a perceived threat. We had an invitation. There was two boys, Schmidts, Eugen and Rudi Schmidt, and their mother. They had, as a family, they'd been given some money by the German government. They bought a small farm. There they had the mixed farming, couple cows, strawberries, raspberries. The boys went to Vancouver to work, to earn money, to pay for the remaining of the farm and so on. They needed someone to run it. So they made us the offer. If we come over, they would pay the airfare, substantially the airfare to get here. I would have to work on the farm for 2 years. Just me. And Mom was assured that she could find a job in a senior's home or a kitchen or in a church or somewhere. They felt fairly certain that she would get a job somewhere. So on that basis, we got rid of everything we had and hopped on the airplane, and headed for Canada. Wow. And more or less it turned out that way. It was a remarkable trip in many ways. The Braniff, the flying through the Andes. The plane could not hold the altitude under storm, so while it sunk, it had to now, instead of flying over the mountains, it had to weave through the mountains, practically by lightning as well. I was sitting at the window and looking out, and when the lightning struck, I could see the tiny fractures in the mountainside, almost at arm's length beyond the airplane. People were gasping, some were crying, some were screaming, some were praying as we were zigzagging through the mountains. And every once in a while we dropped. God knows how much. Just all of a sudden, straight up, boom, and then regain the balance again, just to fall again. And in the fall, it would lose its balance, so it would fall. And when it hit solid air, it would often be on the side, so it would glide in or away from into the mountains one way or the other. And then it had to be restabilized, so we were thrown back and forward. It was a wonderful flight in Miami. We landed. We had to stop over in Cuba, then in Miami.
I feel like you spent a while in Miami, didn't you? You were grounded in that airport for a while?
Oh, in the airport, yes, but only the day or so, right? Oh. So we arrived, didn't know where to go, was no one there, and finally it was announced that somebody came and interpreted for us. Your plane arrived late, weather I suppose. The one you were supposed to go on is gone, so we don't know what to do with you. So we settled down at the airport, and after some hours, we were starving, we didn't know where to turn. Eventually we had to make a move. So Mom and I talked, and I said, I'm going to find somebody. So I walked up and down through the walkways, the corridors of the airport, and approached people that I thought were approachable. And I must have broken into a smile because I saw this military-dressed young fella, broad shoulders, a great big gun hanging beside him. And he had a glowing, exuberant smile on his face, looked as handsome as an actor and as strong as the strongest thing. I must have smiled. I stopped right in front of him to stop him, make sure he heard me. And then I said something in German. He shook his head. What? Yeah. So we stammered for a while. Oh, yeah, So he says, just hang on. Be right back. He was right back, and I walked towards my mom. Sie sind das dann? Yeah. Okay. Meine Großmutter konnte Deutsch. Ich bin ein Offizier, I'm an officer here. One side of my family knew German, and I got some of it. So he says, first of all, we're going to feed you. So the best restaurant is over here, follow me. Whew. So we followed him. He said, now here, order anything that you want, because I'm going to make sure the airline pays double and extra. So we sit down there, and the waitress comes, talks. We can't read the menu. We don't know how to order. We know nothing. We sit, and he finally comes back. Was ist los? What is it, the menu? We had never even seen a menu before, let alone being able to read it. We're just staring at the menu scribbles on it. Would you like a steak? Would you like a lobster? Would you like 2 lobsters? He started. We were so dumbfounded. I have no idea what we ordered, but he said, no, more, better. Anyway, waiter, he says, just stay and relax. I've arranged a hotel for you. When you're down here, the cab is waiting outside. It'll take you to the hotel. We will call the hotel in time, so you're going to have breakfast. They're going to serve you breakfast there, and then they're going to bring you here, and there'll be a guide with you that will take you right onto the plane that you got to leave with. Just enjoy your time here. Nothing's going to go wrong. I'm going to look after everything. Wow. Now, how would that be if you could go back and meet him again?
No kidding.
That would be a dream come true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was Miami, and then from there we flew across New York. We might have landed, but New York hit me in such a peculiar way. The greatest mystery opened up. I saw endless miles of lights off the ground. It was dark late at night. Lights and lights and lights. That city, yeah, that's New York. City. Now, how many people? Okay, what? I mean, I know when there is 100 people in the village, you know, you can exchange goods and wares and so on. You know where the food comes from, when you know where the washroom is to go and where the church is, right? How can 1 million people live in such a tight spot as this, which seems pretty big? How do you know where you get your food? How can you go get your food? How can you go this? How can you do that? How does it fit together? How does this fit together? It was mind-boggling. I could not get that out of my mind for months. How could so many people live so close together? How could each one have a function? How could each one worry about food and clothing and shelter and home and all of those things? Well, of course, we didn't know about specialization. Mm-hmm. But to a 16-year-old kid who never had an inkling of a population more than maybe a few hundred, this was a mystery.
That's amazing.
It's the, magic. As we landed in Toronto, it was 20 below, whatever. I wore sandals and no socks and short pants and a shirt that was half buttoned up with just a little blanket over my shoulder. I looked out, snow. It's snowing here. Is that snow? How does it taste? I ran, scooped up some snow, tasted, looked around. Frida, snow! Eat snow! Ah! I took a run and I dove into the snow and I came out of there like lightning, like a bolt of lightning. So bloody cold on the bare skin. I was basically not dressed. And minus 20, 30, it's awfully cold to a Paraguayan who comes out of this desert of 110, 120. Yeah, there's such rugged contrasts that were forever, ever keeping your eyes open and astonished. One of the really astonishing sights was when we must have come out of Calgary. We must, decide the train was going mid-January.
And this is on the same journey too?
Same journey coming here, yeah. But the train was rumbling along the track, and below was a Fraser, and the Fraser had frozen, and the water, of course, on the river does not stay. The ice does not. It broke and it tumbled, and here were millions of ice chunks the size of anywhere from cars to houses. They were crunching, crashing. I could hear from the train crashing, building up, and then crumbling again as it broke down again and rolling on. I mean, something like that hasn't happened since '57, probably.
Yeah.
It certainly has never happened today. Yeah. But what a majestic sight as well, and that I saw from a few days after I left the back of my horse in the desert.
It's crazy. Mm-hmm. All right, well, I think that can be a wrap for Paraguay. I mean, I know that there's so many more stories and to go through in there, and I know we even throttled ourselves a little bit, quite a bit. But the next parts of landing in Canada are also just, I'm excited to go through your story of school and boxing and your job, and there's so many cool things I'm excited to be able to get into, and in the coming videos we do.
We could do a little bit online too.
I like this.
I like this too, yeah.
Yeah, we'll do it between coffee, tea, maybe beer. Maybe
but I think next time you have more piercing questions as well, because you have an outline, and maybe I can send you some sketches. And I mean, we do have to cover my trip to the Soviet Union, which was
I'm really looking forward to diving through that.
Thunderous, awe-inspiring type of a moment, yeah.
I'm trying not to get too excited about jumping too far ahead of the order. I really do I really see a lot of value in going through things in the order kind of that they've happened, because I feel like it just creates a lot of continuity that allows anyone who's hearing the story and learning about your life to kind of put pieces in together. Because I think even in my own childhood growing up, I knew all these stories. I just had no idea where in your life they exactly took place. So what's really exciting for me going through this together is...
You were always quite curious.
Yeah.
But your questions were short, and they were easily satisfied.
Yeah. Tonight? Or usually? Tonight or usually?
No. When you were 4, 5, 6 years old.
Right, yeah.
You were always curious, but you had a very succinct point of what you were asking, and you were easily satisfied with the answer. It gets more colorful and more depth to it in time. And I think for that reason, if we are initially historic or fact-oriented, and then the subjective coloring we can follow.
And every episode we do doesn't need to be about your life story in every one of these. So, I'd love to even come on here with specific topics that we can discuss.
Hey, can I wrap it up with a cute little story?
Yeah.
I started off by describing the village. A young couple beside us that were probably draft dodgers or escapees, so on, hippies, and then a woman and a sister and 2 little daughters. Well, across from them was a single woman. Her name was Buller. And she was a phenomena. She was like Rocco is to the rest of the dogs in the neighborhood. Phenomena. She didn't mind making noises and making imprints on her surroundings. So she owned a home and a little chunk of land by herself. But she was restless and perturbed, annoyed, always prodding and attacking. So it got to be 120 or so, whatever degree or more. And she was half dying. She was short and fat and noisy and loud. So she threw, our houses were built, the floor was mud. So she threw a bucket of water under her bed and then crawled under it completely naked, trying to stay cool, not to have a heart attack from the heat. 140 is pretty hot. There's no hiding. Villages, no trees. The trees didn't help a lot. So she threw a bucket of water under her bed, crawled under, stark naked, and rolled around. And I guess she felt relieved for a while. When she tried to get out, she couldn't get out. It turned slippery and slimy. And the more she kicked, the more she clawed to crawl out. She spooked. She freaked. She got a deathly fear that she would never be released out of this hellhole from down there. So she started screaming. And could she scream? So some of the young boys heard the screaming, and they were afraid of her initially. They came to rescue her, but then they hauled out adults to back them up, right? I mean, these young criminal Mennonites are pretty naive, and when they saw a naked woman kicking around in the mud, they ran for help rather than get their hands on her. Anyway, they dragged her out from the mud, and everything turned out fine. But she became the fascination of the entire young, excitable, horny men, boys in the village. And she was not shy about her body. So she would wander in the evening at nights across the front yard, etc., just a gown over her. The wind would blow it in all direction, and her naked body would show frequently that she was unconcerned about. But the boys were not unconcerned about. They'd be standing behind fence posts and peering, and they'd bring their flashlights, and they'd be flashing whenever the opportunity was, get a glimpse of her naked body. She was a phenomenon. And she leaned upon the young single boys for attention. I forgot how it ended, but it doesn't matter. The rest it just follows a natural course.
Hey, I one more story I never heard before.
Oops.
Great
we finished it on Mrs. Buller.
That's it.